G'day guys, I'm Dmac from NBA Fantasy Bible, and along with me is Kayla Fonte, and together we're Between Two Hoops. Kayla, how are you going?
I'm doing good today. How are you?
Doing really well. Not long now until the start of the season. Super pumped. And today we've got a massive show. We're talking about our sleeper picks, and it's guys that we're looking to target who are currently having an ADP outside the top 100. So I think these guys are going to help people win their championships. Maybe not by themselves, but it's definitely going to go a long way to helping their cause. So let's shall we get into it?
Let's do it.
All right. Sleepers, late round targets. All right, we'll start with my sleepers first. A lot of big men on my list, but starting with Walker Kessler, obviously had a very disappointing season last season, much maligned, but I think he's in for a bounce back season this year. ADP in Yahoo of 100, so he's just made the cut in terms of our criteria that we're looking for today. I think he's got the opportunity to really have a bounce back, as I said, but looking at some preseason games, they had a game the other day. He did start. John Collins actually came off the bench, but we'll go into a little bit more detail in a minute when we talk about Taylor Hendricks. But Walker Kessler got the start. Didn't look very sprite, but he at least got some decent minutes. And yes, it's preseason, but I do believe that he's got the stat set to really shoot up the ranks this season. So nice target for me. Looking to the next one. Oh, there we go, Walker Kessler. One that I've been big on pretty much all preseason is Onyeka Okongwu. We spoke about how the Hawks didn't take Alex number one. It didn't want to work out for them, but maybe some of that is also leaning into more Onyeka Okongwu. High draft pick from a few seasons ago. Yes, last season was disappointing where we saw some nice progression the previous season, but he still wasn't able to get that starting spot ahead of Clint Capella. I think this is the year for him. I think it's time that Capella is either moved or pushed to the bench. I think the indication that they didn't take Sarr at number one, I think that's an indication that perhaps they're going to put some faith into Onyeka Okongwu. I think that's the case, but even looking at that ADP of 118, that's really at his baseline. That's worst case scenario. So I think the sky's the limit with this guy, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up being a top 80 player. Next one, whoever follows me on Twitter knows how big I am on Amen Thompson. I've been talking about him pretty much since the end of last season, how I think his breakout is imminent. I think he's a top 35 or 40 dynasty prospect in fantasy, particularly in category leagues. But I think this could be a really interesting season for him. He may not start, but last night he actually started the preseason game for Houston. Yes, Dillon Brooks was sat during the game, but he did look really impressive. And yes, he played alongside a friend Van Vliet, but I think Amen Thompson's in for a massive season this year. ADP of 121 on Yahoo. Fantrax, a little bit more nuanced, I guess, and a little bit more, I won't downgrade the knowledge of Yahoo users, but there's a little bit more specific leagues on Fantrax. But 106, probably a little bit more targeted there around Amen Thompson. I think 106 is still good value. So I expect big things from him. Even in 25 minutes per game, I think he's definitely got that fantasy stat set will hold him in good stead for a top 100 finish. And if he does start, geez, watch out. Perhaps a top 70, top 60 may not be out of reach for him. But yeah, it really depends on how many minutes he gets on that really loaded Houston team. Next one, Alex Sarr. He was always my number one rookie in terms of fantasy this season, but he looked really bad in Summer League. Had a nice preseason game the other day. Looked very impressive. It really comes down to his shooting as well. We know what he can do at the defensive end, but if his offensive game is in sync, I think the top 100 is within reach for him. And again, it does come down to how much patience the coaches have in him and maybe just the minutes as well. But I think Alex Sarr, particularly with those blocks upside, I think he's pretty safe at around 138, that ADP of Yahoo, 131 on Fantrax. I think that's a really safe pick at that point. He wasn't very popular coming into draft season, but I think over the last couple of days, a lot more people are finding some value there. Next, we spoke about Walker Kessler at the start of the show, but Taylor Hendricks started the preseason game ahead of John Collins. A lot of hype around him at the end of last season, but going into his sophomore year, I think he's going to have some value there. And if you can get him around that 143 mark, as per the Yahoo ADP, or even 138 on Fantrax, I think there is enough upside for him to be very valuable and contribute to your fantasy team. So look out for him as a late round target. Next one, not much of a breakthrough guy because he's been around forever, but Mike Conley at 127, I think that's great value. He's put up top 70 value, and yes, he's older. He's probably more likely to sit, but he actually played a lot of games last season for the Timberwolves. And 127, I think he smashes through that value quite easily, and I think he's just not a sexy pick, and that's why he's really falling down draft boards. But if you can grab him around that mark, I think you're doing really, really well. And I think top 90, top 80 is not out of reach, even with those missed games as well. Next one, a little bit, probably a little bit further down that draft board and more of a stash play, but Jalen Smith. He's come across from Indiana. Obviously, he was a high draft pick, played for the Suns as well. Now in Chicago, he's backing up Nikola Vucevic, and who knows what's going to happen with the Bulls if they're going to blow it all up. Nikola Vucevic has obviously been in trade rumors forever, but Jalen Smith, if you have the patience to hold on to him, and he'll play some okay minutes, probably not going to be 12-team viable to start with. I think towards the end of the season, depending on how the Bulls are actually tracking, I think he's a really nice stash. And if you can afford that and have the patience to stash him, I think he's a nice pickup as well. I'm saving the best to last. Noah Clowney. Again, those that follow me on Twitter know how much I've just been talking about this guy for quite some time. And I think with the news overnight that Day'Ron Sharpe is going to miss some time, Nick Claxton isn't 100% as well. There's some hammy issues going on with both of those guys. Noah Clowney already had some upside in his role prior to the injury updates as well. But now that Day'Ron Sharpe's going to be sidelined, I think he's going to play some 5 minutes as well as at the 4. So I think just his fantasy stat set is really conducive to a fantastic pickup late in the draft. I know he's going a lot earlier. Just going back to the ADP, 145, 153, you'll be lucky to get him at that point now. So target him a little bit earlier because I still think that long term, particularly with the tanking Nets, I think he's going to be a fantastic play. Looking at the last 5 games of last season, just to give you a sample, and it is a small sample size, but just to give you a small taste of what he's able to do on the court. April 6th, he didn't start, played 24 minutes, but look at that stat line there: 17 points, 6 rebounds, 4 blocks. Real traditional big man stats, but 4 blocks in 24 minutes, that's unreal. The last 4 games of the season, yes, there were some tanking, resting, what have you, shenanigans in the silly season for the Nets. But last 4 games he started, 35 minutes, 39 minutes, 28 minutes, 41 minutes. Look at some of the lines that he was putting up. So that's just a taste of what he can do. That 7-block game is amazing. So perhaps there's an opportunity for him to just show his wares. And I really like him in a dynasty as well. So keep an eye out for Noah Clowney. You will have to go a little bit higher than what you would have probably a week ago, just with the recent news that we spoke about.
That was
Kayla,
a great list. Clowney is also on mine as well.
He is.
Very hyped up. Yeah, and he's got a good position with Sharpe out. Obviously, that's only for just about a month at the moment, but still elevated value for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, so heading into my sleepers, these are all players who are also going to be found on my article for sleepers that I'll be publishing the same time as this podcast. But to start us off, of course, there's a Raptor there. Can't go without him. RJ Barrett. So with Barrett, though, this is more so for a Cats League sleeper, just because in points, he's going a lot higher than 100, obviously. I've seen him about 50 in hashtag basketball, their rankings. But Barrett was traded from New York to Toronto last season. And since then, I think he's just been a totally amazing player. For the first time, we saw him shooting over 50% from the floor, which is huge because of all the efficiency concerns that comes with drafting him. And obviously, he's not the best category player. I know there's already a lot of people who are staying away from him. And I think that's just what makes him a great sleeper. He's going to be a top offensive option alongside Scotty Barnes this year. And I think that's just going to be huge for his overall game especially when we saw a lot of his numbers increase from his time with Toronto. So now that he's had a full offseason to get accustomed to the team and he has a full year with Toronto, I think it's going to be huge for him. Potential breakout incoming. And next is Tyus Jones. This one is a bit of an interesting pick because with Washington, that was his first time in a consistent starting role. But now that he signed with the Phoenix Suns, it's changing his role and his minutes and value a little bit. A lot of managers are concerned that he's not going to have the same production alongside the big three. But I think that he can still carve out a very good role for himself, especially since he's playing at the starting point guard spot. So he's bumping out Grayson Allen in the starting lineup, but that's good for his value. He's never really been a big points guy. The most that he's ever averaged, I believe, is 12 from last season, but he can still give you those assists, some of those defensive stats. And as we know, the Phoenix Suns are a very, very injury-prone team. So that's just going to help his value if there's injuries at any point in the season. Then we got Keyonte George coming up next. And this one, he's entering his sophomore season, and I think we can just expect a big leap from him this year. To begin last season, he spent most of that time in a bench role, but towards the end, after I think about February, he got a consistent starting role, and we saw glimpses of his potential in that role. Obviously, there was a lot of issues with turnovers, efficiency, and things like that, but those are also part of the growing pains of being a rookie. So we can still maybe expect to an extent those issues as well, but we can still get those playmaking stats, points, and he's going to have a bigger role offensively. And I think they're really going to be committed to developing guys like George this season, especially because they're not exactly a championship contending team. Next, we got Brandon Podziemski. This is one that I've seen mixed reviews about. I've seen a lot on the fantasy Reddit that he's already being overrated. And I think that's just due in part because Klay Thompson is gone. So everyone is expecting a massive breakout season from him this year. I don't think it's going to be a huge, huge season, but I think we can still expect a lot more than what we saw last year, especially because he's going to be playing alongside Stephen Curry, which is a great learning opportunity for him. He's probably going to be starting at the shooting guard spot, which is also good for his value. And they're going to want him to develop and learn from Curry. So they're going to be giving him a lot of minutes. He's going to have that hopefully consistent starting role. And there are concerns that the Warriors brought in a lot of offseason additions, but I don't think that they're going to eat into his value as much as people think that they will. So he's going to hopefully have a large increase in threes. I saw something that they wanted him to take about 8 threes per game or something like that. So
that's right. Yeah.
That's very promising. So that just opens up a big role offensively for him that I think that he's going to fill. So also his other Warriors teammate, Trace Jackson Davis, him I'm a little bit lesser on just because his role is still a little bit fuzzy. If you look at most depth charts, he's still projected to come off the bench. But I think that he'll still get a lot of opportunities to start throughout the season, especially with Draymond Green. He hasn't been the most healthy, or obviously suspension issues as well, but he hasn't been the most available player over the past few years. And also, Draymond is also getting a little bit older. Now they're going to want to start developing their younger crew as well. Same with Steph Curry. He's getting older. It's time for these young guys to learn from the older guys to start getting comfortable for their future. So he had a really good field goal percentage last year, but not a big offensive game. I don't think we can expect that to jump drastically, but he's good for those defensive stats and production, which we can count on him for. And another sophomore, Scoot Henderson. So I know a lot of managers got burned from him last year. He was a top 3 pick. Obviously, there's a lot of hype going into the season with him. And I don't want to say that he disappointed, but he definitely underwhelmed. Turnovers, efficiency, those were the biggest issues with him last year. And then obviously some injuries as well. But like I said, even with Keyonte George, those are just part of the growing pains of being a rookie. Now this year, we're heading into a Portland team that's obviously not a contender as well. They're going to be developing their younger core. I think we can expect a leap from Henderson this year. I think he's going to be determined to prove himself. He showed really great flashes of potential heading into the last stretch of the season, and that's where he was really let loose. And it also helps that Malcolm Brogdon is no longer with the team, and especially because there aren't many other players who can run the point for Portland. So big season incoming for Scoot. I would feel comfortable taking him at about that ADP of 133. I think that's reasonable. And Norman Powell, this is an interesting one because in most of the mock drafts and real drafts that I participated in, I've seen him going closer to like 160. So I'm surprised to see him at 135. But I think even then, I would be comfortable taking him a little bit before then. He's not the most versatile player, but he can give you points, threes, solid efficiency, low turnovers, a couple of rebounds here and there. But it's all just because of the hole left on the Clippers team by the loss of Paul George. Obviously, James Harden is going to be one of the biggest beneficiaries of that. But I think we could still expect big things from Norman Powell, especially as a veteran presence on the team. He is projected to come off the bench, but he could still carve out a big role for himself. He's a great sixth man, and we can expect good things from him this season. Definitely an increase in the points for sure, and threes and offensive duties.
I love him as well. That's why we have the asterisk next to his name. So yeah, he would be on my list too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and like I said, I was surprised to see him going really late in a lot of fantasy drafts that I did. And I think there was somewhere I saw him ranked as like 160 something. And I was floored, but yeah, got to go pick him up for sure.
Yeah.
So another Raptor here, Kelly Olynyk. Obviously, he had more a bigger role last season in his starting role as well due to Jakob Poeltl being injured from March to the end of the season. Poeltl is now healthy, which limits Olynyk's role a little bit there. But I think that we can still expect him to provide solid fantasy value. I wouldn't draft him as high as I would have based on his ranking with the Raptors last year. But I think he's still a sleeper pick because we've seen his production. He's a very versatile big man. He can give you a little bit of everything. His stats don't jump off the page, but he's still very valuable. And who knows what's going to happen with Poeltl, especially after those comments. A Raptors fan might kidnap him or something. A lot of people were not happy about that. So if he goes missing, Olynyk is going to step up.
Right.
And like I mentioned before, it's a rebuilding season as well here. Just like Poeltl said, they're not competing for a championship this year. I don't play for the Raptors, so I can say that. But yeah, they're not competing for a championship this year. Why not give different opportunities to different guys? He can still be a sixth man off the bench. Their depth there is lacking a little bit, so I think he could still see maybe 20, 25 minutes per game, and he could still carve out a role for himself as well. And this is my biggest sleeper, Dyson Daniels. I did a draft, actually in our league, a couple of days ago, and we were drafting, I think, at about the 150 mark, and I was surprised to see that Dyson Daniels was still there, just sitting. So I had to pick him up, even though like I reached for him maybe a little bit. I probably could have left him longer, but because there was so much like picks in between, I had to grab him then. And I was surprised that he was just sitting there because DeJounte Murray is gone. There is a huge hole in that Hawks backcourt right now. Trae Young is going to carry most of the offensive duties in the backcourt, but he's going to need help. And it's the starting shooting guard rotation is still a little bit murky, but I think we can expect Dyson Daniels to start at that position. Even if it's Bogdan Bogdanovic starting to begin the season, I think at some point that will be Daniels' role. 100%. You can quote me on that. But he's a very good...
like that. I like that thought process. Just because he just complements Trae so very well, just with his defensive game. And we saw it at the Olympics. He was a hound on defense as well. So I like your thought process there. And I wouldn't be surprised if Bogdan did start to begin the season. But like you said, Dyson Daniels will start at some stage.
Exactly. And like you said before, he just complements Trae Young really well, especially in the sense that Daniels can give you those defensive stats. His offensive game is still very raw, but we saw glimpses of potential of being a solid scorer with the Pelicans last year. I don't think we can expect like crazy numbers in the offensive categories, but I think he's still really good enough to give you great sleeper value. And I'm shocked that he is not going sooner in drafts. Unbelievable.
And again, we did see him in the Olympics for Australia. He wasn't
Mhm.
shy in shooting the 3-ball as well. So he's got that ability. He can stretch the defense as well. And he will be a point of attack on defense, similar to an Alex Caruso, Drew Holiday in his prime as well. So I think he's going to be really important for the Hawks as well to stay competitive.
Definitely.
I really like your list. Yeah, I also like Keontae George. I think they're going to hand, particularly if there's some shenanigans going on, if they are tanking and Markkanen. I'm hoping, because I've got Markkanen in a couple of leagues as well, that he stays on the court for most of the season. But if not, Keontae George is really going to be a beneficiary there. Trayson Jackson-Davis, if we hear that he's going to start alongside of Draymond Green, well, that's massive. So that ADP of 127 is steady for now, but if we do hear that he does start, that's going to be shooting up very, very rapidly. And Scoot Henderson, yeah, great opportunity. And not to mention Shaden Sharp's out for a while as well. So even more opportunity usage for Scoot moving forward. So love that list. Really, really good list.
We both had awesome lists.
Like it very much. Now, this is a very quick episode today. We just thought we'd give you just our thoughts on guys outside the top 100 in ADP, but hopefully that was beneficial for you guys. And please like and subscribe. Continue to follow us at Kayla_Fonte to follow Kayla. Any other happenings going on at the moment, Kayla?
Yeah, so pretty soon I'll be releasing my tier lists for ranking each position. So keep an eye out for that. And the sleeper article that I mentioned earlier will also be coming out today as well.
Looking forward to that. And I know that you're scheduled to do many shows coming up. So you'll be
I'll be busy.
A guest on many, many shows. So keep an eye out for Kayla. Of course, you can find me at NBA Fantasy Bible on Twitter. Make sure you give us a follow on YouTube as well, and also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much, Kayla. And until next time, see you guys.